Hi folks, Bob from Fusion. We've been getting a lot of questions on is our Bantam series of pistols. You'll see this isn't a standard Bantam, but it's a Thorn. It's one of our new models. The Thorn has a tactical rail, but basically is set up like a Bantam. You're basically working with the same animal, so if it's within this realm of defender or officers, you're generally going to be working with a reverse plug system. With a reverse plug system, there's a little bit of different disassembly. Some guide rod systems will have a hole in it. If they have a hole in there, it's for a paper clip or a little pin that you can put into it to retain the guide rod system. You're always going to be under tension. So when you're under tension, it's a little bit harder to work with a reverse plug system versus a bushing style. But when you move to the smaller handguns with a shorter barrel length, generally you want to use a reverse plug system. It's just mechanically it works out better for you for reliability and longevity, everything else. How do you take this apart? How do you clean it? How do you just field strip it? Number one, obviously, you want to make sure the gun's unloaded. Make sure you're always racking it back. Make sure the barrel and chamber are clear of any ammunition. Make sure you don't have any ammunition on your bench. We don't want any mistakes happening. We don't need anybody getting hurt. Where are you going to move into next? You got to move the slide back to the slide stop removal notch, which is right here. All right. Make sure you understand which notch is the correct notch. You wouldn't believe the amount of people that send guns in, whether they're Fusions or others, and they want us to repair them, and the slide stop's all bent up, the back lug on the slide stop's all ripped up, and it's because they're using the slide lockback position as the exit slot for the slide stop, and that's not going to work right. Take some time, understand your firearm, understand how the operation works and how the disassembly works. It's real important that you don't make mistakes that end up being costly, and you got to repair the product after that. Now again, this is going to be your exit slot for the slide stop. Basically what you're going to be doing is I end up taking my fingers, I move the slide back, I rack it back to a point, and you'll see how on the bull barrel I'm holding my finger like this to hold it in place. You also notice I'm really not at the engagement point yet, the clearance point. So I'm going to move it up. I'm going to move it up a little bit. Oh, right there. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Right there, the lug on the outside or the inside will be positioned where you can slide this out of the gun, upward, out, okay, and it has to go through that notch. Now sometimes when you're pushing on the pin, the slide stop pin, you'll notice you're getting some resistance. Well, maybe you're not lined up a little bit, so you might have to move this back and forth a little bit, and get yourself into the position, the sweet spot. And then also push down on the slide stop because it will have a tendency to be up, and that'll also cause you some issues. Make sure you just push down. And then with your finger, I just push on this side, and you'll see it has popped up, okay, a little bit. Now, it's difficult. For some people, it's very hard to pull this out because there's not a whole lot to grab onto. If it was an extended version, it might be a little easier, but you got to remember you're under tension from the plunger that's inside the plunger tube, okay? One of the things I do is I just take a punch. I have a little radius rounded on it so it softly take care of the pin over here, not dent it or anything. I put it right on the spot, and I'm just going to tap it. Boom, see? A slight little tap like that on the bench. Then it comes up and out very easily. I can remove it with my fingers, and then I can let the slide forward. Now sometimes the link will get a little bit sticky depending on how it swings down. So I'll just tap the slide, just give it a little tiny tap. What that'll do is kind of move the link into the position that you need. Also, you can use your scribe. This is a multi-purpose tool, which I always tell people to have one. And you can usually get inside here and align it. You can also move the link into position sometimes. But generally you can take a soft-faced hammer and just little tap. Like I'm hardly putting any resistance on it at all. It's just, or pressure. It's just very, very little bit of tap. That's it. You're not going to hurt your finish. You're not going to hurt your gun. Then just remove the slide from the frame. Put your frame aside. And you'll notice you got a dual spring system in here. Your primary spring underneath, which this one generally doesn't need much replacement ever. And then this the mainspring up top is basically the same size as a standard mainspring. We have a couple of different weights of these springs. and replacement springs for the gun if you need it. Also, you can use a standard 1911 spring and cut it back and also use it as the mainspring here if you need to. I like them when they're both closed ends with the reverse plug style, but you can get away with the one end being open at times. So what do you do now? Well, you're going to take this and you're going to pull this recoil system out. You'll notice I can push it forward with my fingers, and you'll see how it's basically acts like a piston. And again, it's going to be under spring tension. You got to watch what's going on here. Many of these you can just take it, squeeze it with your hands, pull it up and out, and you'll see the system pulls right out quite easily. That's your reverse plug. The reverse plug, you'll see it's keyed. Okay, and that key, what I mean by key, there's a shelf there, and what I mean by keying is it only goes in one way, and you'll notice there's a corresponding shelf right here. There's a corresponding shelf right here. So you'll match up the flat here to the flat there when you reinsert this into the slide on the back side. Now, if that didn't come out with your assembly, with the guide rod assembly, you can just take it, push it with your finger, remove it from the back side, and your reverse plug is out of the pistol. Next, you're going to drop your link down, take the slide out of battery by I'm just rocking it slightly, and then moving it forward and right out of the pistol. A little dirty, we've been shooting it. From that, you'll see the slide has basically been field stripped. You have your barrel, you have your guide rod system, your slide stop is out, and your reverse plug. All these parts are out of the pistol, out of the slide. Now, for maintenance on your guide rod itself, a little bit of oil, that's all you really got to do. There is a hole in the main rod. You push this out far enough, you can put a pin in it. I usually don't do that. I usually just remove it with my hands. If it gets a little stubborn, I'll show you here, taking it apart one more time in a vise. That will also facilitate field stripping. Say you're in this position right now and you're having a rough time getting this guide rod system out. Getting the guide rod system out sometimes is stubborn. You might have to do something else to take this apart. I'll show you what I do when I get a stubborn one. One thing is sometimes people have a rough time when the slide's not supported well, you know, they just don't have the coordination to get it out. Take a couple of rags, put it in a vise, clamp it in a vise lightly, you know, so it can support the slide and it's staying steady, and then you can end up just pulling it out, pulling it back, and taking the guide rod system out. Alright, so what happens when it's real stubborn and you can't get it out with your fingers? You're having a real rough time. I have two screwdrivers, just cheapo little screwdrivers that I've ground a little radius cup on both sides so I can grab onto the sides here, and you'll see where I position my thumbs at the back side of the recoil system, and I will put the two screwdrivers right on the ledge. I'll pull back the spring, compress it, and then pull everything right straight out. And maintenance on this again is just clean it. You take your fouling and debris off of it. A very light oil. I usually just run a little line of oil just down it, rub it in onto the spring, actuate it a little bit. Same with this reverse plug. I just clean it, a little bit of oil off your fingers like that. You're good to go. So now you have your slide. Your slide is all apart. Do a little bit of cleaning, which going in here with a little bit of solvent, brush the rails, brush around the disconnector slot, brush in where the breech face is, clean all the debris and fouling, and that's really all you got to do. Now we go put it back together. Take again the barrel, insert it down through the bore, put the link down, just like that. You'll notice by rocking it, you can get into the lockup position. Your barrel's seated. Make sure it's in the lockup position. Remember I showed you about the keying, where you have the shelf here and you have the flat also on the reverse plug. We're going to mate those. Then we're going to take the link, bring the link up so it's out of your way. And then we can go ahead and put the reverse plug system in here. Push the back of it with our fingers and you'll see how it comes out through the front. relax it back against the foot of the barrel. At this point, you know, you have your top end assembly is completed. Push it back and forth to make sure I don't have any binding or anything weird going on. After that, you know, I'm going to push the link forward. You're going to be under a little bit of pressure. After that, I'm going to, you know, do my typical oiling of the rails. Once I got everything oiled in that, we'll reassemble the frame back onto the slide. And you'll see it. You're pretty much in the battery position right now. I'm going to rotate it over. And now again, remember, most important thing here, that we're in the right slot. That we make sure that we're always in the right slot, the clearance slot, to put the slide stop back in. And this is another point in time where I use my scribe. Make sure your link is lined up, because if your slide stop pin is not in the link, you're going to have trouble. Then I'm going to take the slide stop pin, insert it into the link area. Then I'm going to move back the slide to the clearance position like that. I'm going to hold it with my fingers. It's a little difficult to do this because usually I do this against my chest. You'll see I put it right against my chest. I'm going to pull it back. Now I take my scribe. I pull back on the detent. And you'll see how I put that right in. And I push with this thumb in, and you're done. Now, next, make sure you rack your slide. Make sure everything's working properly. If you have some type of binding, possibly your guide rod's not in there right, if you can't rack it back, generally what's going to happen is you're not in the link hole properly. Okay, so that's an issue. At that point, I usually rack the slide forward. I make sure the thumb safety is working. I'll make sure the beaver tail safety is working, grip safety. And you're ready to go.